The share of the vote says that people want to see the back of the Tories. They were happy to have Labour in, but this is no great surge for socialism. This is no red dawn that has come up today. This is not 1945 when Labour were elected on a radical platform. And Labour will need to keep that in mind. Its support is wide, but it's shallow. As for the Tories, and again, reform has played its part in this, they've not been reduced to a rump, but it's almost a rump.
It's a Labour landslide day. We do know that. We heard from an awestruck Pat McFadden, the man who, it has to be said, he's been on this programme quite a lot. He was the man who masterminded Labour's campaign, and he did it. After 14 years, the Conservatives lose power in a catastrophic defeat. They are set for the worst results in their history.
But it is more complicated an image than that, because despite the landslide, we've lost a couple of Labour figures you've heard rather a lot of on this station. Thangham Debonair and, most surprisingly, Jonathan Ashworth, who lost out of nowhere to an independent standing on a pro-Palestine ticket. This is a historic swing to Labour tonight, or this morning even. It's not tonight anymore, but they have been hurt a bit by the Muslim vote that has definitely not turned out for them. Wes Streeting, actually, who's going to be the next health secretary, held on by just, wait for it, 400 votes.
All of that little comfort to the Conservatives, who have lost 12 cabinet ministers, setting a brand new record. And we should look to Scotland as well, where the Labour surge has been particularly pronounced. The SNP have really been swept away. They're currently sitting on 9 seats. There are still a couple of Scottish seats to declare. So whether they stay in single digits at this point, in an almost complete reversal of their electoral success of the last decade, should be resolved within the next few hours. The Lib Dems have won seats. Reform UK have also got 4 seats in Westminster, all at the expense, or largely at the expense, of the Conservatives. It has been an astonishing election in so many ways. The big winner, though, the triumph for Labour and for Sir Keir Starmer.
It is the lowest ever vote share for a party that's won a majority. It is a very, very low turnout of just 60%. I'm trying to get lackadaisical landslide going. Lucky landslide, someone has suggested, or maybe a super majority. We're going to try and determine the tone as we go through the morning. How do you feel about this? You can let us know as well. 0333 003 2353 is the WhatsApp number. You can text us 87222. Start your message with the word Times. And Chloe Tilley has been really doing a great job in pretty testing wet conditions. An election that began in the rain is continuing in the rain. She's at Downing Street. We'll be expecting some comings and goings, including a Chancellor with some bags packed.
We are going to speak to Andrew Neil now, of course, Times Radio presenter. Morning, Andrew.
Good morning to you.
What did you make of this then? The exit poll, I'm sure you stayed up for that, had perhaps some, it wasn't completely right, but maybe that doesn't matter now. What do you take from all of this?
Well, the exit polls are never completely right, but this exit poll is pretty much as accurate as any exit poll can be. The one thing it got wrong was the number of seats the Reform would get, but it didn't get wrong the impact Reform would have. And it's produced some anomalies. I mean, the big story of the night, overwhelmingly, is Labour landslide. They're in for 5 years with a huge working majority. That can't be gainsaid at all. The second biggest story of the night is the demise of the SNP, which means that the campaign for Scottish independence or separation is over for the foreseeable future, perhaps for a generation. Indeed, the SNP will be lucky to hold on to Holyrood now, come the 2026 Scottish elections. These are big events. The union is safe, Labour's in power, and they're related because it's always much harder for the SNP to make ground in Scotland if there's a Labour government rather than a Tory government in London. I think the two things looking forward that we should be mindful of is Labour's won this massive majority on only 35% of the vote. It got 35% of the vote and 65% of the seats. Now, I know Pat McFadden says you wait on seats. We understand that. But the share of the vote says that people want to see the back of the Tories. They were happy to have Labour in, but this is no great surge for socialism. This is no red dawn that has come up today. This is not 1945 when Labour were elected on a radical platform. And Labour will need to keep that in mind. Its support is wide, but it's shallow. As for the Tories, and again, Reform has played its part in this, they've not been reduced to a rump, but it's almost a rump. And although Reform didn't get the seats it hoped, it's had enough of an impact that it will play a role, particularly Nigel Farage, in any kind of realignment of the right that now takes place. So this is a big event.
It certainly is, Andrew, and you're going to be talking about it at length. There will still be things going on, of course, as cabinet positions to be decided. There's a lot of choreography today, and Andrew Neil will be on Times Radio at 1:00. Do not miss it.
Stephen says, I'm not a Labour voter, but could the media, i.e. you, try and say positive things about a party that's won rather than always trying to find negative things like vote share? As a fact, we're trying to catch a tone here, and the tone is a difficult one. It is a massive, massive win for Labour, but they got 35% of the vote share and 65% of the seats. That is not nothing. But you're right. I mean, we're trying to tread between these two things, Callum, isn't it? It's this question of, it is a huge win for Labour. That is the one A, B and C results of the night. But it is not a massive endorsement in the popular vote for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, and I do wonder if there's a sort of question to be asked about whether the electoral system has kind of creaked a little bit at this election. It was described earlier by Tom Calver from the Times and the Sunday Times as demonstrating that the UK is a very marginal country. In a lot of these seats, very marginal results. And actually, does first past the post represent that well? And I was just scrolling through the text messages. I mean, there's not zinging enthusiasm flying out of your messages that you're sending. Perhaps you want to change that between now and 10, that's fine. But, just as an observation, I just wonder if there's a reality thing in all of this. And the popular vote point is right. I'm trying to pin down the exact numbers, i.e. how many millions of people voted for this party or the other, but I've not found a dependable breakdown quite yet, and I don't trust myself to do the maths. So I'm going to wait for somebody to give me that. But we're working on that, just so we can see the actual differences in the popular vote. But the percentages on that front, in terms of vote share, and this is with 5 seats left to declare. Labour on 33.8%, so let's say 34%. The Conservatives on 24%. Reform UK on a little over 14%. And the Lib Dems on 12.2%. The Greens on 6.8%. The SNP on 2.4%. I say there are 5 seats left to declare, just to let you know that South Basildon and East Thurrock, that's not going to come anytime soon. There's going to be a complete recount. That's going to start at 2 p.m. The first count was delayed. The Reform candidate there, James McMurdoch, appeared to have won the seat, so this report goes, with around 12,000 votes from Labour's Jack Ferguson and Tory Stephen Metcalfe around 1,000 votes behind. Let me continue, because it's just theatre at its best. Initially, candidates were told Reform had won by a margin of 127 votes, so Labour demanded a recount, and an initial check found botched counting procedures. The saga continued until 6 a.m, and then Thurrock Council CEO and returning officer Dave Smith said he'd told counting staff to go home, and a full recount would have to take place.